Hi, everyone. Welcome to Digital Experience. This is our iteration retro meeting. It's Thursday, September 8th. We will go over things that went well this iteration and some things to improve on. So first up for things that went well is Justin.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, our ability to jump on things, some crazy updates and changes to the commit landing page. Thanks to Megan for being on the spot. I have a follow up on this later down. Things to improve, but like, Megan, you were there making the changes as they came in right on the spot. So thanks. Elsa?
Oh, just +1. Thank you, Megan, for your patience. I really appreciate it. And it's been really chaotic. So just a lot of acknowledgement and thank you for being on top of it. I could pass it over. Things to improve on, Justin?
Actually, Lauren's got one more.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, one more. Things went well. I just wanted to do a shout out for the nav team. Thanks for being flexible and pushing through to getting that nav release out. It's a big one.
Things to improve on, kind of to my point above, is that we need to work with our content owners and requesters, and not always bending backwards to accommodate their massive list of changes all the time. We should ask them for consolidated issues of all the changes, and we make the changes and then move on to our next issue, next iteration, and not constantly be making like iterative updates for these pages that one, they should be doing, and if they can't, we need to request they consolidate everything so we can do like one set of updates and that's it. Laura?
Yeah, this has come up on our team too, that kind of mid-quarter we found out that we're actually building our localization out. So it's tough that like we, as a team, we keep trying to be more involved in the OKR planning every quarter, but still things just kind of pop up. Philza?
I thought, like, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought the localization was a part of the OKRs. I know it's not part of the core ones with the different groups, but it was like part of the foundational work. But maybe that wasn't communicated well enough.
I thought it was more of like a stretch goal kind of like.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, I think we had always talked about kind of starting this work for localization, but now this needs to be like built and we're having meetings with SmartLink. But yeah, now I feel like we've got like a due date, like it's got to happen.
I believe in the team. I think we definitely have capacity to be able to do it. So yeah, totally. Lauren?
I have the next one about sprint boards. And this kind of just want to pose a question out to the team is how can we reduce issue carryover from iteration to iteration? Nathan, I see you've got a point there.
Yeah, I think this is a much bigger issue, and I added some points underneath as well, but I think we need to be updating the boards. I think the issue for carryover is like they're just too big. So maybe we're taking on work that's like months. I see some that just sit. Sometimes we're waiting for content. We're waiting for another team to approve. Like we're waiting on things. And so what if we make these MRs or these issues smaller so that they fit within an iteration? Because right now our tracking is a bit off. Like if you look at our current board, I think we're at like 30 to maybe 40% completion. And I know to us, like that doesn't mean much, but there are some people that may look at that and be like, okay, like I guess what's happening with the other 60%. So I think we need to stay on top of it and make sure we're not overcommitting. Like sometimes it's better to undercommit and pull stuff in than it is to overcommit. And so that's just my thoughts on it. Tyler, I know you have the next point.
Yeah, you sort of answered that a little bit, Nathan. I'm just curious about like the numbers. Like what's the actual problem here, right? Like, is the problem that we're carrying over 60% every single week, and like is that an average, right? Like, is that true? Like what are the actual numbers? Like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Because like I don't want to make changes or like I don't want to solution something without like a clear problem statement. And if it just like feels like we're carrying stuff over, like is that really an issue? Like how many points are actually getting carried over every iteration? But I think I would guess anecdotally that there's probably like 50% kind of sounds right. But Nathan, I think you identified things that like we end up waiting on with requirements. Like those should get dropped from the iteration. Like if I get tasked with a thing and I end up in waiting, like out of my iteration, right? Like that's not, I can't work on it. Like if I can't work on it, then it shouldn't be on my list. But I guess my question, like Lauren, do you have numbers that you're thinking of that are the problem?
I don't have any specific numbers. It's something that I've just noticed that we have carryover, and
I think the first first step is like get the numbers, like get the historic data, right? And then like second step is like set a goal for like percentage completion or like, you know, percentage carried over, like either a higher completion percentage or a lower carryover percentage. Like, and then we can track towards it, and then we can make a change and see if it helps. But like you know, just like with anything we do with our OKRs, like if we can't measure it, we couldn't possibly know if we fixed the problem or not.
For the issues that carry over because they're waiting for content, we could close the engineering issue and then open one that's just applying the content without actually merging the code that doesn't have the content still.
I guess it's another point where we can step back and say like why are we doing boards? And I think the decision to do the boards was to just get a fairly accurate, but like somewhat like not super granular, but to understand what's going on, iteration on our team. And so we can go up to whoever and say like, this is what we completed, this is what we committed to. And if that's still the plan, then I think we need to figure out this carryover thing. But if it's not, and these metrics don't matter, then again, I don't think carryover matters. So maybe just understanding the use case again from higher ups. I don't know. I'm saying higher ups, but I don't know who actually analyzes this.
I know like for a fact Ray does, so that this is like data and information that he genuinely wants to see. So he has requested like burn down information around like how much work is being completed. So it is important. And like Nathan, to your point, there are people looking at it. It's like, we're not doing this for nothing. Yeah.
Have
Okay.
they communicated metrics that they're looking for on that?
What do you mean, like which data they're looking at specifically?
Yeah, it was just like the same question I posed to Lauren. Like, are they unhappy with like the completion percentages? Are they unhappy with the carryover? Like, do we have a specific number we're trying to meet for that?
Lauren did.
I think we're in that process where we get to help guide that discussion now. And I think it'd be great to get ahead of it and guide it the way that we see fit, that's going to help our team work efficiently.
Yeah. I think the response from our team so far has been like, we're not at that stage yet for this data to be accurate. So we basically want to set our team up for success by getting ahead of, like Lauren said, getting ahead of it. And like our new org structure, it hasn't even been a quarter that we've gone through this. So this is like preliminary and like just area of opportunity for us to improve on.
Tina has a point ahead of me about design issues carrying over, and I have a similar point that like there are some issues that I think by nature are just going to be longer issues. You know, maybe like with design, I'm talking out of my butt, but maybe design goes a lot of back and forth with yeah, Tina, I can let you talk if you want. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of back and forth. SmartLink is going to be another one where we need infrastructure. I don't know when we're going to get that resource. We're still meeting with SmartLink to figure out a path forward. Like, I expect this to go on for another 2 or 3 sprints. Not that it's a lot of work, but just the back and forth. So I don't know the best way to handle those. They're probably going to kind of tank our numbers a little bit.
Yeah. I'll just go out of turn. That SmartLink POC was like a perfect example of one that I could see going to the end of the quarter. And so me and Laura connected on that, and yeah, we're going to elevate it to an epic. I think that makes, sense for that.
Maybe if there's up for design issues, we can sync during design planning to see what that problem is, what the consequences are, and how we can change our issues. I'd rather not break down design issues into smaller chunks just for tracking. But yeah, we can brainstorm something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want this process to be disruptive to anyone's workflow, to be honest with you. It shouldn't, like, tracking shouldn't disrupt y'all's workflow, but the point is not that we're expecting 100% all issues are closed every single iteration. Like, that's not the expectation. So say we have 75 to 80% completed every iteration, and we have like very valid reasons of like why there's 20% that are ongoing. There's a Smartling one, design issues, etc., etc. That's fair. The other part of measuring this work that's super important is like actually over time to see if we're getting better. So like, say we're only closing at 20% for the first 3 iterations, and then after that we're improving, like even being able to show that to the leadership team is super helpful information to have.
I would, Tina said a good word, consequences. I'm curious to know like how leadership is using it, and if we're consistently only hitting 70% and there's like very little improvement, and that's just kind of our standard. I don't want to be fired over something like because my Smartling issue stays open forever. But the other thing, I kind of like, we had a similar kind of process at my old job, and it got to the point where they placed a lot of importance on burn down charts. And so at the end of every sprint, all of the employees were kind of fudging their numbers. They'd start closing things even if they weren't fully done yet, but they didn't want that issue to carry over, and they'd address it next, like quietly create a fix for it next iteration, or they'd ping their buddy, oh, can you review this real quick and merge it in and whatever, like it starts to get a little bit like you worry less about the good work that you're doing and more about like how it looks like the work that you're doing is getting done. So I worry about the importance that we place on the numbers. I love it as like insight into what our team is doing, but as long as like there are huge consequences, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very fair feedback. I think it's like you said, it's insight into the work, and it's a lot more about planning the work. Like, we know we can expect X number of issues to be completed. So then it helps like myself and Lauren and Justin like report back to the leaders to say like, we can't work on XYZ because we know how many issues we can complete within a given iteration, and we're already at that limit. Therefore, like, we can't accept new work. So a lot of it is capacity planning, to be honest. But again, like, at least from my perspective, and I think Lauren and Justin share the same thing, like, we don't want this to be like a burden on anyone, and like, we want good work, and that's way more important. And the metrics that we're improving on the business, like, that's key. It's not about how much work we do, it's about the quality of the work, and like, we're moving the right metrics in that way. So this is more of like a secondary level of insight that we can use to help us plan our work. Does that help?
Yeah, I think ideally if Philza, Lauren, and Justin, if you keep us updated, if leadership starts to look for specific things and we're not hitting targets or whatever, if there's problems, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also think like their leadership is just looking for data, like a lot, the change of the past couple months in our leadership in the organization, not just in marketing, but across the board. Like, they come from other companies that have used data differently, and they are trying to see like if that works well at GitLab as in their teams now. So I think a lot of it is like, they knew what they used before. Can it work here? Want to look at the data, they see the data, and it's not what they expect to see because they're used to something different. So I also think there's some level of like education across the board. And this is just an initial, like, like we said, like, keep an eye on it, keep an eye on your boards. We also have some issues that kind of linger if it's something in dub, but the issues in buyer's experience that we forget to close and they kind of linger open, stuff like that we can make sure we keep on top of to close, just so things don't stay open forever.
To be honest, I have no idea where we are anymore in this document. We've jumped around. I don't know if we want to jump back to Tina, because I think we skipped over Tina. No, we're good. Tyler,
I was-
did you? Oh, sorry.
Oh, can we create an action item? I really like Tyler's second point here for setting a goal, or at least figuring out like what or if there should be one, or
Yeah, or just
Um,
like, this is the first time I'm really thinking of it. Like I haven't looked at those
Yeah.
charts in a long time, so it's like it'd be great to think about. Like it looks like, looking at the two that you linked here, it's there's like 51% and 44%, right? And it's like, what if like, so now I have a benchmark. I'm like, okay, we're at roughly half, so maybe 30% is a goal for the rest of the quarter. Like, can we get it down by 20 percentage points, right? Or up, or whatever the direction is. like get it gooder by 20%, by 20 points. 20 points gooder, something like that. It'd just be nice.
yeah, I'm putting that down there. What is our goal? So
Nathan, do you want to go with B? I think that's where we are. Like I
Sure.
said my B part already. So
Sure, I'll jump ahead. I know I brought this up earlier in the year. I want to add an in review column. Tyler's saying that I took it away.
You took it away from me. I told you
No,
I liked
I
it in
wanted it.
review.
I've always wanted this column.
No,
I've always
I remember you taking it away from me, Nathan. I don't know. I'm salty about it.
Okay, well, okay, maybe I did, but I want it back. I want that column because I think
Me
it's just,
too.
like when I look at the thing and it says like I have 5 issues or something like in doing, it's like, okay, 4 of those are in review and I'm just waiting for like a checkbox or I'm waiting for like something, and it's frustrating. And anyway, that's just my personal opinions on this. I know a bunch of us have had that column in the past at a previous company. I don't know if you liked it or didn't like it, but
I think it
That's
would also be a good number to communicate. They would identify bottlenecks too, because like, what if we're looking at the burn down charts and we've got 3 or 4 iterations that are at 50%, but then we hone in, we say like, how many of those open items were in review? We can say like, say a little bit more with nuance that it's not just like items not completing getting pulled forward, but like our review step is a bottleneck, right? I don't know that that's for sure the thing, but like I would guess that's actually probably a contributor.
I'm personally a fan of it. I've had it in previous ones and like I agree, Tyler. I think just for clarification though, by in review, do you mean in design review or in review by a stakeholder? Like, are we just using this as like a big bucket for in review by anyone? Yeah.
I think it's
Oh,
like, I think it
Yeah.
communicates, like if you are the person assigned an issue and you put a review label on it, what you're saying is, I did my work, I'm waiting for an approval. Like, and that might be design review, it might be code review, it might be some other stakeholder. Like, I think it's just I'm done, right? Or like, I believe that I'm done and I have submitted it, but it's not like live, like it's not closed yet. And there's a good reason, because like there is some approval process, and that's probably different for every subset of like type of work we do, right?
So with that in mind, Tyler, and this idea of in review, that might help our design issues carrying over forever. And now, just since I have all your brains here, I don't know how you do it, Carrie, but I keep my design issue open for maybe too long, like usually until things are deployed, because that's where often stakeholders are communicating with me. I'm wondering if in review would help, or if we just close that issue, and as soon as I ship a design and there's an engineering issue, I open a feedback issue. And maybe we can standardize that type of process. So the design issue is done, then the feedback issue is open, and then hopefully that could be closed out within an iteration. Or is that clunky? Or do we just do all the feedback in the engineering issue? Because I get stuck navigating 2 issues, the engineering issue and the design issue, because I keep my design issues open.
Yeah, that works for me. I'm willing to try it.
I think it makes.
well-
I think. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, Lauren or Justin, do you know if other engineering teams operate similarly? Or the boards? No.
I think we're
know-
in like a weird spot just because of like what we do and like we have so many outside people requesting things and whatnot that like the product probably has more say on their stuff, but we get a lot more noise coming in. I was gonna say like my point, and I think that's kind of similar to like Tinez, is like even the analytics, like Dennis, when you have to have an issue open to like collect data for a long period of time, like that's one that we have to figure out like how that works and how that looks on their boards, because like our burn down charts are specifically the project, so you can't really filter out like certain things unless you, I mean, you can, you just have to do the math yourself, but like then the charts aren't as accurate.
Sorry, am I next? Or milestones, do we use that? Or
We
how does
do
that impact burn down charts?
They're based off iteration. I don't know. I don't think we're using milestones at all right now.
For the longer ones, couldn't we do both? Like have a milestone, let's say it's 2 months out, but continue to carry over the iteration as needed. I don't know. Never mind.
Yeah, I think we should absolutely like look into milestones, and if that is gonna help us, or it could just add more process and
Yeah. I
hinder
don't-
us, you know, like, I don't know, but is maybe they'll help. I can take that on, that as an action item to just start that conversation and research.
Okay, I wasn't gonna vocalize this, but then there's good discussion, so I think I should. I guess in relation to the sprint boarding, I was gonna say that capacity planning as an individual contributor can feel unfair when things get brought up mid-sprint. So what I'm meaning is like if we're having issues with like burn down chart completion rates, but things get brought out mid-sprint, or it's like say like we need to release an events page because someone like needs that by an end of a certain point, it does feel like we're being held to a higher standard that I think is fair to us, because it's like we're being asked to be flexible while also being judged against that like sometimes moving target.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. Placing issues on the open column. I know I asked the team like, hey, I put some on there, grab them if you feel free. So I will stop doing that. And I'll put all the issues on a board at the beginning of iteration, and that's the iteration.
I think what we should be doing too with ones that come in is making sure that the equivalent weight is getting dropped. It's like if you want something, you're going to lose something. And so I think we need to figure that out too, is if you want 8 points, so 4 days worth, we need to remove 4 days worth. And it'll keep our numbers the same. And it'll also be like, hey, if you want stuff, there's kind of consequences.
I think that's fair. I think that feels fair too.
I agree. I think the only other thing I added was that there is a Dex unplanned label. I don't always remember to add it, but if you are being asked to do work that's being brought in mid-sprint, like please add that label. So at the end of the iteration, I can just account for how much unplanned work was brought in. It's just like a visibility, transparency thing. It's like just so we can also communicate outwards how much extra work the team was doing in that quarter, in that iteration. That would be super helpful.
I think we also take into account that like not every other group team works in our iteration cycle. So like this KubeCon Midget Javi's working on, like it's going to roll over to next sprint because it's not due to next sprint, but he had to start at this sprint. So there are certain pages that certain things that do roll over, and that's just the nature of like the work, and then kind of how we're doing, because we don't get to dictate some of those like hard due dates.
Just a point there. What is 1 point? 4 hours sounds good.
I don't think we ever documented it anywhere, but I think like the unwritten, like I think 4 hours is what we somehow agreed upon. I have no idea how or when we did, but we should probably have that in the
I
handbook.
think
I saw
Yeah,
it in the
there-
handbook.
there's something in the handbook about it.
Sweet.
Half a
Good
day,
job.
though it's not written in hours. It's like
Mm.
written in days. It'll take me maybe 3 days to find it, but I'll link it when I find it.
You mean 6
So
story
it'll
points?
take you yeah 6 points to find it.
I guess one thing just to add about the whole thing is like no stress. Like I know it seems like extra process and like I don't know, you have stuff and get it done by Thursday, but it's not like that. Like keep working and doing things as you were before. But I think we should be a little more cognizant on like what the board looks like at the end of the 2 weeks. And so I think it's just a little more housekeeping. And I don't want us to stress over getting stuff done for Thursday and like not sleeping Wednesday night kind of thing. I just wanted to vocalize that.
I think I have the next one. My point is just that, is there a better way to communicate when a component is already being used that is not in Slippers UI? Especially the new ones that are being created. It happened to me this iteration that there are some cards that are going to be used in the features page, the solutions page that I started to work on, and then I realized that Margaret had already created those, but it was not merged. It is not merged still, so it is not live. It is not on Slippers. So I was just wondering if there's any good way to communicate that a component that is in multiple designs is already being created by someone. It also happened to John with a component that I created, and that one is harder because we are in different groups, so we are not necessarily looking at what other groups are creating. So he didn't have an easy way to realize that I had already created that component that he was going to use. So he was about to start creating that one again.
So in that case, it happened since we did the full migration and the release of the new brand of GitLab. We did a lot of components that are repeated, even 3 or 4 times. And there is no easy way to detect that there are replicated components all across the project. And we have, let's say, more than 100 components in the project. So I was talking with Mateo about some solutions that we can think about, maybe implementing storybook for the common components, and in that way we can see what components we have. But there are some other components that are on their solutions, on their support, that are the same, but as we are different groups, we do not have a way to know if another group did that component. So I don't know if we can create a single source of truth for our components and check this component is here in this folder inside the project. It can be reused. So I don't know. It would be a bad thing in the future, because having 5 different components with a similar layout that does the same behavior is not a good practice. So I think we need to think about how to avoid replication of components for the future, as to be safe.
Or maybe at the Figma level, when a component is placed in a page design, maybe just to mention that it is also placed in another page, and then we when we are going to develop it, we can check if that page is already being built. So if someone is already creating that component or is already created.
Yeah, that was the line I had, just checking in Figma or checking with a designer. I feel like, I don't know, could be making this up, but I feel like our designers talk to each other, and that's where we're getting like similar components from. So it's just a matter of ask your designer like, hey, was this component used anywhere? Or not to put extra work on designers, but like you could also just label, hey, this is used elsewhere. But also that I think that's a mess then if you're labeling every single thing in Figma, like this is used on this page, like that's gonna get messy. I do see like some outliers, and this is a bad example, but it's the only one I can think of, is like the frequently asked questions component. I think we have, like we use them in 3 or 4 different pages, but like some of them are used differently, or like accordion components. Like there's one frequently asked questions component that it like has groups that can expand, like groups of questions, and then the questions themselves expand. And it's like they're so similar, but like the functionality and kind of JavaScript behind it is like more messy if you keep like if you have to specify what kind of frequently asked questions component you want to use. It's like, where do we draw the line of like, hey, just make a different one? The FAQ one's probably a bad example, but I like maybe like cards. I know we're having like trouble with like cards because we have so many different types, right? Like you just have one card component that's like super dynamic and messy code wise to handle all these page like different types of cards across our site, or do you just make like so many different card components? There's some kind of lines we have to draw there. I guess when in doubt, ask.
Yeah, I mean, I think like one of the things I think Nathan did a really good job on this most recent slippers iteration that we should like extend forward is like the core set of things that live in the slippers like node package became like a much slimmed down version of them, right? They became like sort of like the primitives of like here are like the containers and the rows and like some typography stuff, right? And so like I think there's a little bit of if it is true, and I don't know if it's true, but like if it is true that like every card on the website looks basically the same, should look the same, then like there ought to be like a slippers component that the only thing the component does is look a certain way. It should have no JavaScript in it. It should look like it should basically be like a CSS and HTML bundle, right? It should do 0 things. And the cool thing about like the way that view works is you can like pass those like JS handlers like onto them. The challenge becomes sometimes when the semantics are different, right? Because like sometimes we treat cards like buttons and sometimes we treat them like links, and like that's kind of weird, and I would argue like wrong, right? Like there's like some weirdness with the semantics, so it can't always work like that. But like, you know, if the thing that makes a card is the like border radius and the shadow and the padding, right? Like if it's like those 3-ish things and a handful of like other small like, you know, icons and stuff, like we should consider really slimming down what slippers exports and do less in slippers and like override behavior in those custom areas, right? And think of it really like a UI package. The other thing, you know, think about like custom slots too, right? So there's a lot of cards, I think, that like sometimes we put like icons in cards and like top right, or sometimes they go on the title, and it's like we could do a little more JavaScripty viewy stuff if we say like, okay, like here's the card component and it's blank and it doesn't know anything about anything, but it does have 4 custom slots. And these custom slots are the things that like they will accept content, they will accept other components, and we can style them. So if we like I think, you know, maybe the thing to do, and we should do this across like this is why we do slippers, and this is how you make design systems work, right? Is like, so at this point we've probably all made 3 different versions of a card, and so we should stop and like take a breath and like come together and like send one person from squad, like per each squad, to a working session and say, let's make the perfect card right? Like let's do the card thing. And then we make it, and then we incrementally, we adopt it in places where we have the custom cards. And we say, this is the card. And like it's in 0 places, and we put it in like 1, 2, 3 places, and we do it kind of slowly and like catch anything that kind of breaks or changes because like, oops, we forgot an abstraction. But like, and same thing for all the other components, but like we do on a smaller set of components. I've gone on, but that's sort of like, that's the work. We got to do it. I think this is the thing. I think like we have the autonomy to do it. Michael's like, we've talked about this, like this is like that 20% time. Like this is the Friday thing. So like, maybe tomorrow or next week or whatever, like maybe next week, because we just are talking about it today, but like next Friday, like I know, it's no meetings, but like this isn't a meeting, it's a working session. Let's grab like 4 people. Every squad sends a person to go be the card person, and then like let's hack out a card and then try it. And if it doesn't work, then we just don't use the component. Like we don't need to like swap. We don't just find and replace all the cards. Let's make the card, see if it works on a couple pages. If it doesn't, we do it again. And I think that's good use of the 20% time. And if we keep on doing that, slippers will become more robust and will reduce some of the duplicative things and like different things.
I think I completely agree. I think there's one part though, it's that we can create a basic card, like a design system card that is, like you said, just a couple slots, could be header, footer, content, body, whatever you want to call it. And then let's say we have a design for a certain variation of a card, and then 2 separate people go and make that variation. So now we have 2 variations that are the same thing, but coded independently. And so I think we need a place, and maybe this is what I was subconsciously thinking when I made that compositions folder in Slippers, and that is maybe for those unique elements. Like every unique element is just displayed in Storybook somewhere. So all those 50 variations of cards are there. And so when you're starting something, you can go there and say like, oh, someone already made this composition, which is just how you made the card component work into the design. Because I feel like what's happening right now is that we're duplicating a lot of these one-offs.
I think the challenge though is the discoverability. Like we don't have like I can't search for it. If there's 80 cards in Storybook, I'm not looking. Congratulations, or I'm sorry, I'm not reading all that. Right? Like I'm just not like, I'll just make the card. I'm just gonna make a card because I can do it a lot faster than I can look at 80 different cards and find out if that's the one. Right? Like and that's kind of why I feel like we really should be like, no, this is the card. Like this is you get one card from Slippers, and if you got to do something else, like you do it. But but every time anyone ever augments a card, they augment that card component.
Can I ask a question? So I think because designers are kind of the front line and we kind of see what's going out, a card is a great example. If I see something or I'm using something that I know exists somewhere, and then I'm like, hey, I know this is on this page. How do I know if that's the right version, or if it's like without having that source of truth? Like, how do Carrie and I figure out, and Jess, which page or which component to point to if it's outside of Storybook? The card is a great example because we all were working on it simultaneously, Jess, Carrie, and I, and then whomever picked up that issue, and I believe it was Margaret, started working on the card, and then the issue that Mateo picked up was 2 months later. So it was, I think she was doing it for the release post, and I didn't even know Margaret was working on that. So we had no real way to know that Mateo was going to duplicate that card, if that makes sense.
I know in Figma, sorry, Mateo, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that if you know that the component design wise looks the same for both pages, you could just point the engineer, and then the engineer can check whether or not the code can be adapted to the page that they are going to build.
Yeah, that makes sense. In the case of the cards, the design that yeah, it was just like a flip in time. Basically, we thought one thing would be built before the other and didn't know the other one, which came way later, months later, was going to be the first one out, and it was in a different team. So we didn't know it existed. I didn't know it existed.
In the Figma slippers, I don't know what to call it, slippers project, where there's elements like the border, colors, grid, there's components, but then there's blocks. So cards, CTAs, headers, quotes. I'm looking at quotes, and I know we have many different quote components or looking quotes throughout our website now. Can we try keeping this more up to date with like, okay, if you created a new quote design, you just stick it in here, and then we can like probably use this as a source of truth, and it's like, all right, it exists somewhere, whether the developer needs to do some sleuthing, like it exists somewhere, we just have to find it, or like we know who to ask, like, all right, this was clearly used before because it was designed before. Now I know I shouldn't make a new one.
Yeah, we were thinking the same with Mateo, something like a library of components in Figma or in the project. In the project would be a lot of work, and also in Figma. But we can incrementally add some things. For example, a carousel component. So we create our Figma library or our buyer experience component library. We add that component. And for example, if it's in Figma, we can put the URL to the project where that component is located. So that will make the engineers to find components easily, and also for designers. The designers can go to this Figma library with components that we keep adding, and they can know also that this component exists in another page. We do not know in which page, but we have the URL for the component in the project. We can elaborate more that, but I think it would be a good start point.
I also have a suggestion there. It's related to something that came up in our product marketing meeting earlier. We were discussing about having multiple different in-page navigations, and I created this issue that I'm going to share here in the chat, just to track the navigations that we already have in case we are going to reuse them. And we could do something similar for components that we realize that are being duplicated. We could have an epic with a bunch of issues inside for tracking this kind of components. And I think it's easier to create than what a storybook in buyer's experience would be, or maybe a Figma file. Yeah, just a suggestion.
Wait, how would we track these? What's the proposal? Sorry, I missed that. Or is that what this issue is?
This
figuring out?
issue was just a result of a discussion that we were having earlier. It's not really related to this conversation, but it's similar. This one was because we have multiple in-page navigation. So we decided to create an issue to show those in-page navigations and where they are being used, just to have a guide as to which ones we have. And
you know what this is great for? Handbook. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think once that, because I think that issue more is to do like an analysis of which navigation we're keeping and we're going to reuse and which ones are snowflakes. And then kind of once that's sorted, is it handbook, or is it, do we need our own pajamas, or like a fully, like we have to have a single source of truth with our design system, and duplicating something in the handbook might not be the best choice. It's either one or the other.
Very good point. Seems like an action item we can do. Discovering a way to document. The best way for this. We're quite a bit over. So I'll put that action in there. But let's close it out. Any last words?